maybe I'll just turn the big resistor around so it's not crossing wires. And then there's just this little capacitor, and then you might remember there's a jumper. The purpose of this jumper is to connect power ground to signal ground. So I think I might put that down in here. All right, so I've got things, basically in a good location. Maybe I can move these down a little bit. I could probably tweak this a little bit more, bring these parts closer and make the board even smaller, but let's say I'm going to stay with that. Now, again, I could spend more time making this even smaller and tighter, but just for the interest of time, I'm going to just leave it as it is. So once you have the parts pretty much tightened up, the next thing to do is to take the board outline and shrink it. All right, so to select the board outline, you want to first select board outline from the menu and then enable selecting other objects from that selection menu. So now over here is where you get the different board layers. So we're going to click on board outline, and then we're going to do enable selecting other objects, and so that allows us to select the board outline. And then you can just take the corner and drag it in. So I'm actually going to make a little room because we're going to need to place some mounting holes as well when we're done. Okay. So the next stage of the project is to connect the wires. And so I'm going to give you a little demonstration. I'll do a few runs and then I'll just let you figure out the rest. So when you're running the copper wires, there's a couple of rules to follow that'll make things easier. First of all, try to run as many connections as possible on the bottom of the board. Secondly, as you're running these copper traces, try to keep most of the traces on the bottom of the board going in the same direction. When you have to move perpendicularly, that's the time to go to the top of the board. So what I'm going to do is try to keep as many of the traces going roughly left to right direction. What that does is that will keep channels open for any connections that you need to make on the bottom of the board. And then on the top of the board, we're going to use that for the connections going top to bottom so that we have channels open on the top of the board. So first step is to go to copper bottom, select that layer, and then go to place line. So let's say I'm going to connect these two resistors here. If I click on the pad and then click on the pad where it's going and then escape, basically that connection is done. So let's do this connection. Click there and there, escape. So there's two connections that are done. These resistors also have to connect over to the transistors. Okay, there's a couple more connections. So let's look at this transistor here. This one is connecting, if you go back to the schematic, this one is connecting from the fan. It takes the negative terminal of the fan, connects to the collector of the transistor, and then the emitter goes to ground. So this is the pin for the fan. I can go through kind of like under this resistor and I'll get over to that point that way. So let's do that. Place line. And then the other side of both of the transistor goes to power ground, which is over here. And it'll make one more connection. So notice that both of the transistors, these are the emitters of both transistors, so both of those have to go to power ground. They're both connected together. Then we can look at the connection to the resistor. That one we have a connection to the collector of the transistor over to the heater resistor. And then the other side of the resistor, of the heater, is going to connect back to power ground. So this one, suppose I could, oh no, sorry, that one connects to 24 volts. So I could run this up over here. Okay, I'm going to stop there with the connections. I'm sure you can figure out how to do the rest of them. Just kind of what I'm doing. You're going to find that at some point you're probably going to have to go to the top layer. And let me do that as an example. Let's see, maybe I can do one more run and then give you an example of how to go to the top layer. Let's say I want to make this connection here on the top of the board. So that's just a matter of going up here to the layer and go to top, copper top, and if you run the line, you'll see that it comes out green. So the green is the color for the top of the board and the red is for the bottom of the board. And so what you can do with the top and the bottom is you can run, let's say I want to run this connection on the bottom of the board. I can go right under that trace on the top because it's on a different layer of the board. So you'll probably have to do that with a few connections in here, run the top of the board. But what I'm going to do right now is, if you go down here on step 4, one of the things that's here is that any wire that's carrying current through the fan or heater needs to be 20 mils wide. So that is the entire path of that current. So that's the high current. The default width for these wires is 10 mils. So the high current paths, if we go back to the schematic, would be starting from 24 volts, going down through the heater to the collector of the transistor, and then out to the emitter to power ground. And from the fan, it would be the trace from the terminal for the fan through the collector to the emitter and back to power ground. So we have to find that whole path over here. So let's do the one with the fan first. So the fan is connected here. The current through the fan is going to come down through here into the collector of this transistor and then back to power ground. So I'm going to make that entire path 20 mils. So to do that, click on the path. Oh, sorry. So what I have to do is I have to enable selecting traces first. Click on the trace. Now what you want to do is right click and do select entire trace. If you don't do that, then you have to do every segment all by itself. So this does the entire thing. Then you right click, go to properties, and under general, where it says use net settings, click it, go to 10 and change that to a 20. And that will change the width of that entire segment to 20 mils. Okay, so we want to do the same thing with the path from the emitter back to power ground. So you click on that, and remember to do the select entire trace first, and then we just go to general, properties, general, and enter 20. All right, and so same thing would be for the path to the heater and that path to ground. So make sure you trace all those high current paths and make them 20 mils. So that's the basic idea. There are a few more things that you're going to have to do, so follow the handout, all the steps in the handout. You're going to have to do some things with the silkscreen layer, which is the ink that's printed on top of the board with labels. You have to move some labels around and get things arranged properly. But that's basically it. So good luck with that, and I will see you in class and lab.